Welcome back. Today we're talking about knife law in the United States compared with knife law in the United Kingdom. But first of all, if you're just new to our legal community, I'm a practicing barrister. If you've got questions of your own, make sure you like this video, comment down below and subscribe to the channel. That helps me grow and it makes sure that you don't miss out on future videos. So there's a lot of debate as to whether knife law actually reduces knife crime. And I'm not really going to get into that debate today, but what I would like to do is just draw some comparisons between the United States and the United Kingdom. And obviously the law differs from state to state, whereas in the United Kingdom, knife law is broadly the same for everyone, although there are some separate acts of parliament that relate to Scotland. So starting with a recap of the United Kingdom, you'll remember from my previous video it is an offence to carry a bladed or a pointed article without good reason unless it comes within that exception of a folding pocket knife. So now let's compare some of the laws in the United States. First of all, it will be useful to go through a bit of terminology as to how the law is applied, so it will make more sense as we go through some of the states. The first term is carry law. This dictates what you are allowed to carry outside of your home. Next we have ownership law. This might forbid something to own even at home just as an ornament to look at. Next, the law might refer to a fixed blade. This is, as it sounds, anything that doesn't fold. So even kitchen knives will be considered a fixed blade. Whereas obviously a folding knife is self-explanatory. It has some kind of folding mechanism, usually where the blade folds into the handle. Next we have something kind of in between. That's an assisted opening knife. That's a knife that does fold, but it requires some level of force to be able to open it. Usually there'll be some kind of spring mechanism that requires some level of force to open it. And these were specifically exempted in the Switchblade Act in 2009. So coming on to switchblades, just a reminder that these are a form of banned knife in the United Kingdom, but in the United States, it's a little bit more complicated. So in the United States, various attempts to legislate for switchblades has generally created a very slightly different definition of what a switchblade is. And this has been made even more complicated by the manufacture of such blades coming just barely within legal definitions or just outside of a legal definition. For example, the 1958 Federal Switchblade Act, which is the only federal knife law, defines them as follows. The term switchblade knife means any knife having a blade which opens automatically, either one, by hand pressure applied to a button or other device in the handle of the knife, or two, by operation of inertia, gravity, or both. So gravity knife, as I explained in another video, is a knife that comes out with some kind of inertia, movement, or gravity. So for example, the blade is within the handle and you flick the knife downwards or upwards and some kind of force, gravity, movement, inertia makes the blade come out. So that comes within this definition under the Federal Switchblade Act of a switchblade. Next we have Bowie knife, which is just taken to mean any large fixed blade knife. Made famous by the designs of Jim Bowie, and it's generally made for fighting. This is now taken to be any form of large fixed blade. A stiletto knife is any kind of long and thin knife which is designed for stabbing. And finally, a dagger. This is taken to be a knife that is sharpened on both sides. One final definition is not a knife, but it's how the laws apply. Without getting too much into the differences between the legal system in the United Kingdom and the legal system in the United States, I will refer to statewide preemption. This is where the supremacy clause in the US Constitution holds that a matter is of such national rather than local importance that federal laws will preempt or take precedence over the local state laws. In other words, where this applies, a state cannot pass a law that is inconsistent with federal law. So with those definitions in mind, it might be interesting to compare some of the states in the United States with the United Kingdom. Let's go. So first up, Arizona. Drop your comments down below. What do you think? Arizona? Anything goes. No critical dimensions, no restricted knives, and concealment by individuals over 21 is not restricted, but there is a duty of disclosure, although this doesn't apply to pocket knives. There is statewide preemption in Arizona, and deadly weapons may not be possessed in a polling place, on an election day, or on school grounds. And there is no pocket knife exception for school grounds or polling places on election day. In Washington, it's a gross misdemeanor, that is more serious than a regular misdemeanor, to be carrying with the intent to conceal some kind of dagger or switchblade or gravity knife. But there's a minor exclusion here where the blade is biased towards closure. In other words, it is more likely to want to close than it is to open. There is no statewide preemption in Washington, and knives are of course prohibited in schools. It's the state of New York where things get a little bit more complicated. You see, in New York, any knife can become a dangerous knife and result in a criminal conviction. There is no statewide preemption, and the laws apply to both concealed and non-concealed knives. There are also various restricted knives such as switchblade, ballistic knives, cane swords, and things of this nature. Also the possession of daggers, dirks, stilettos, machetes, dangerous knives, or razors by anyone that intends to use them unlawfully against another person. In New York, there's also a maximum blade length that applies of 4 inches. In the state of Oregon, there's no statewide preemption, and the concealment of certain knives is prohibited. For example, the concealment of any automatic knife, assisted knife, dirk, or dagger are prohibited. But there are no general restrictions on what knives you can own in the state of Oregon. And again, of course, knives are prohibited in schools. In Nebraska, the concealment of any knife over 3.5 inches is prohibited, whereas in Kansas, a person may carry a knife of any length, whether it's concealed or not. Of course, with the common prohibition of having it on a school premises or in a jail or somewhere like that. In Oklahoma, the possession and carrying of a knife, whether concealed or not, is again generally unrestricted. In Texas, there's no restrictions on concealment, although there is a maximum blade length of 5.5 inches. Unless specific conditions apply. In Minnesota, concealment's not an issue, and there are no specific restrictions on dimensions. And the list goes on with subtle variations here and there, but the trend is that concealment is generally not an issue, except in certain states the size becomes an issue, and obviously the general prohibitions of having them in a school and certain places that would be obvious that you shouldn't be carrying a knife generally apply in each of the states that I looked at. Certain states have legislated to restrict certain kind of knives, whereas the United Kingdom has a long list of banned knives that I discussed in another video that are outright prohibited. You can't own them, you can't buy them, you can't sell them. So this does bring us into the debate as to whether or not strict knife laws will lead to lower knife crime. The United Kingdom has certainly taken the approach to heavily restrict the possession of knives, and yet the statistics show that knife crime is significantly rising. Now, I don't have all the statistics, and even if I did, I think it would be really difficult to draw hard conclusions between legislating for knife law and knife crime statistics. For example, it's been reported that there's been a significant decrease in police stop and search, which itself might be responsible for the increase in knife crime. And it's a popular interview question to anybody embarking on a law degree or for a training contract or pupillage, as we call them in the United Kingdom. These are training courses that are the final step towards becoming a practicing lawyer. The question is often put in such a way to ask the interviewee to argue that legislation does not help to reduce crime statistics. And I think when it comes down to it, that this is the real skill of a good lawyer. Any lawyer should be able to argue for or against a given point of argument. So I'm not here to say that the laws are too restrictive or not restrictive enough, or that they work or that they don't work, or that it's better in the United Kingdom or it's better in the United States. This debate could go on and round in circles for a long time. But do drop your comments below. It's interesting to read your thoughts, your arguments, and your experiences. So I hope that was a useful insight into the comparison between our respective legal systems. Make sure you subscribe, that really does help my channel grow. Let me know what topics you want in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.